This is the Bringing Business to Retail podcast with today's guest, Krizstina, aka Z, Holly, on the art of manufacturing.
Welcome to the Bringing Business to Retail podcast on SelenaKnight.com. Stay ahead of the competition by opening your doors to business experts so you can learn, grow, and be inspired. Passionate about bringing business strategies to independent retailers, please welcome your host, Selena Knight.
Hey there, and welcome to today's episode of the Bringing Business to Retail podcast. I'm Selena Knight, the retail strategist, and I'm here to share with you on today's episode some of the pitfalls and hurdles that you just might face if you are manufacturing your own products. Now, the reason I wanted to do this episode was because I was talking to a retailer just recently about manufacturing, and we were sharing stories. I shared my story about the time that I ordered some apple green fabric, not just some apple green fabric, but about 250 meters of what I thought was apple green fabric, only to discover it was lime green. Oh yeah, I had imported this fabric from China. I had swatches. I had thought that I had done everything right. I'd paid a lot of money, and when it arrived, it was not apple green, it was lime green. But that was not a patch on this poor retailer who had lost nearly $50,000 due to problems throughout the manufacturing process. Now, this person was not dumb. They didn't go into it without the knowledge and without the research. They weren't careless. They didn't rush in. And every step of the way, they were paying people to cross-check, paying experts to make sure that the product was as it should be. They'd done all their testing, they'd gone through and put through the order, but when the actual product arrived, it didn't work the way that it was supposed to. Sometimes stuff just goes wrong. Stuff falls through the cracks, even when you think you are doing everything right. And I know that like I said, I've experienced some problems too. There was the time that I went to the docks to pick up some fabric. The first time I ever went, I didn't know that you couldn't have children with you. And it is a reasonable rule. The docks are a very dangerous place. But at the time, I had my baby in the car seat. She was only teeny tiny. And it never occurred to me that they wouldn't let me in. So I had spent about 2.5 hours waiting to get into the docks to pick up my fabric, only to be told that, no entry while the baby was in the car. So I had to turn around, go home, find a babysitter, and come back the next day. Now, this is just stuff. These are just things that you learn along the way. But some mistakes you just don't have to make, especially when they're expensive. So today's guest is Krizstina Holly, aka Z, and she is going to share with us some of the most common pitfalls and hurdles that novice manufacturers make. And plus, we're going to talk about whether onshore or offshore manufacturing is better for your product. And you might be thinking, why the heck would any retailer want to get into manufacturing? Well, first up, a lot of people who listen to this store do create their own products and they need to get them manufactured. But it's also important to remember that when you manufacture directly, when you are the person who imports products for your business, it can have a significant impact on your cash flow. Namely, you're likely to get a much higher margin because you are cutting out the middleman. And you can also go on to wholesale those products to other stores and provide an additional income stream for your retail business. And perhaps you'll even get access to products that you can't get from your current distributors or suppliers. And of course, no matter whether you manufacture your own products, whether you import them or you simply retail them, you need to do marketing. In this pay-to-play world of social media, it's easy to throw hundreds or even of thousands of dollars at things like Facebook ads and not see the return on investment that you wanted or that you even needed. So I'm going to be sharing with you in the free online training that I've got coming up next week, my 3 biggest mistakes that I see retailers making that stop your Facebook ads from turning into sales. Plus, I'm going to show you exactly what you need to do to turn them around to make them peak performers. So whether you've invested $5, $5,000, or even $500,000 into your Facebook ads, it's probably wise for you to come along to my free training. It's not going to cost you anything, just a little bit of time, where I'm going to show you those 3 big mistakes that I find when I analyze my clients' Facebook ads. Nearly every single person is making these mistakes. And by simply switching them around, fixing them up, tweaking them, you can have a significant impact on your return on investment. And you've probably heard me say many times, you can't afford a brand awareness campaign. You need a sales campaign. So if you are writing off the ad spend that you have right now as brand awareness simply because you aren't getting any return, it is time to stop thinking like that. Your ads have to make you money. And if they're not, come and join me on this free live training. Yes, it's live. You can ask me questions as we go through, where I'm going to share these 3 mistakes. And when you implement them, I expect that you will see a very big difference in what's happening with your product sales. Head on over to selinaknight.com/marketing to grab your free seat on that live training. And it's going to be held on Friday, the 6th of April at 10 a.m. Sydney time. And for those of you in America, that is Thursday, the 5th of April at 5 p.m. Pacific and 8 p.m. Eastern. Again, you can grab your free spot over at selinaknight.com/marketing. And if you can't make it live, I still suggest that you register, because I'll be sending out the replay that you'll have access to for just 24 hours after the event. So grab your spot and register at selinaknight.com/marketing. Now let's jump into today's episode with Krizstina, aka Z Holly. Oh, I've just jumped back in to let you know that Krizstina just sent me an email before this went live. And she was a little bit concerned because towards the end, when I asked her what her favorite store was, she couldn't think of anything on the spot. And so she sent me an email that said, "Hey Selena, when I was asked about my favorite store, I forgot the shop that I have spent thousands of dollars at. It's called Recreational Equipment Corporation. Are you familiar with them? It's a co-op that sells outdoor gear. I'm embarrassed to admit I've spent a lot of money there in the last 6 months. I guess when you said retailer, I was thinking of clothing, but I'm not really into clothes shopping. But climbing ropes and backpacking gear and hiking shoes? Yeah, baby. I wish I had mentioned it. So, Z, I am adding it into this intro, and I'm also going to pop a link to their shop into the show notes. Thanks for sharing. Okay, back to the episode. Before we jump into today's episode, I just want to do a great big shout out to the patrons of the show. Now, this is something that we implemented in episode 100, which is where my daughter Alana, who's 8, interviewed me and got a little bit obsessed with our dog. It's very funny. If you need to pick me up, go and listen to an 8-year-old get interviewed. But this show stays proudly independent, just like your retail store, because of people like you who pledge their support to keep it going. Now, putting this show together is not easy and it costs a lot of money. You know this. This is how business works, right? So I'm out there putting anywhere between 5 and 8 pieces of business strategy advice in your pocket or in your earbuds every single month, and you can pledge your support to keep the show alive. So I would love it if you would become a patron of the show. Simply head on over to selinaknight.com/patron and you can find the information there. Click the big button on the show notes if you would like to pledge your support, and jump into today's episode. Hey there, and welcome to this week's episode of the Bringing Business to Retail podcast. If you are a product creator, a product manufacturer, or just a retailer who thinks that making your own products is going to give you a different revenue stream, then today's guest is definitely going to help you with some tips and tricks on how to get the most out of your manufacturing. Welcome to the show, Krizstina Holly.
Nice to meet you.
Hey, so manufacturing is your jam.
It is. It is.
Tell us, how did you get into this sphere of putting product creators in touch with manufacturers?
Well, it's funny. I myself am an engineer originally, but then became a tech entrepreneur for over a decade. And after that, I started two different innovation centers at universities at MIT and at USC. And in that process, helped faculty and students to turn their research into companies, venture-backed companies. And in that process, I really realized the value of creating community and of helping people take their ideas and make them bigger than themselves, whether it's turning them into a new startup, or we also created the first ever TEDx event at USC as well. And I curated that. And just the idea of helping people get their ideas out there and communicate it with the public. And so when the mayor of Los Angeles asked me to be an entrepreneur in residence, I said, yeah, let's explore the different ways of transferring this experience that I had in building these, helping people start companies, and realize that there's this huge opportunity in manufactured goods. And so I'm reapplying that passion that I have for helping people make something bigger than themselves in a new realm. It's just, another version of this where they're helping them turn a prototype or an idea into an actually manufactured product and tap into the manufacturing sort of ecosystem and the infrastructure that we have in LA. And I also host a podcast called The Art of Manufacturing, which helps highlight some of the really awesome pioneers that are making things.
That's fantastic. But, as much as that's really awesome, everybody stopped when you said entrepreneur in residence. So can you just give us a little 30 seconds about what that actually entails?
Yeah, I mean, it was a new program, and it was the mayor said, hey, well, can you help us even define what this program might look like? And the idea behind it was to make links between the entrepreneurial community in Los Angeles and City Hall. And that went both ways. So one way it was, how does City Hall help the entrepreneurial community and economic development and economic growth? And then the other way is, how do we bring some of the entrepreneurial thinking into City Hall? And so I was enthusiastically willing to help and play this role as long as I could look at an underserved and untapped part of the ecosystem. And most people don't know that LA is the largest manufacturing center in the country. It's a huge industry, everything from food and fashion and aerospace and hardware. And in fact, we think that LA is about Hollywood, but for every job in film and television, there's 4 jobs in manufacturing. So it's a really important part of our economy, but it's not connected like tech or Hollywood is. So that's where I saw the real opportunity. I did a study and ended up, just discovering how big the ecosystem is, how complex it is, and how hard it is. My very first startup was a hardware startup decades ago. It was a long time ago. And I remember how hard it was to tap into, and just navigate the vast, expanse of manufacturing options. And now it's even more complicated. A lot of folks are just going overseas. And so people just don't even know where to start. Should it be domestic? Should it be overseas? It's very daunting.
It is. It's funny that you say that decades ago it was hard, but now it's even harder because we think that with all of our technology and the ability to talk to anybody anywhere in the world, the processes should be easier. But you're saying actually it's harder now.
Well, I think that it's both. It's going to be easier. There have been a lot of attempts. It depends. So I think there have been some attempts to create directories of manufacturers, and they're not that successful yet. However, there are some really awesome entrepreneurs that have created these business models around very specific purposes that make it easier for designers to get things made. So I can give you a few examples. In fact, these are folks that I interviewed on the podcast, and they have great stories. One of them is Yvka Adam, who started Iconery. And the whole idea, she had experience in e-commerce and she loves jewelry. And so she created this platform where an influencer can work with them to design their own jewelry, custom jewelry line. They will have it made locally and then sell it for them on their direct-to-consumer e-commerce platform. So that makes it way easier. Then you have Jessie Janae from Lumi, who started when she was 16 years old. She started as a manufacturing entrepreneur. She had this crazy idea for an ink, special kind of ink. She was on Shark Tank. She ended up turning down Mark Cuban. There's a crazy story behind that. But ultimately, she realized that there was a much bigger idea there. So as an entrepreneur, there were certain resources that she had available to her for the digital side. So, you have MailChimp and you have Squarespace and Square and all, you can put up a website in 3 hours. But when it comes to fulfilling orders and dealing with all the physical aspects of running a business, then it's a lot harder. And so she created this business that handles your entire supply chain for the packaging part. And when you're a direct consumer company, let's say you're creating a product that is direct to consumer, the packaging is their first experience with your product. And so it's like your storefront.
For sure.
So she handles that. And then one more example, Nick Pinkston, he has created a fully automated machine shop that not only uses automation to programming the machines, but then there's this front end tool that enables a designer who doesn't have the same kind of engineering background that you used to have to program a CNC machine to design a part and then know immediately how much it's going to cost and what kind of design changes you can make to make it less expensive or, maybe make it, meet certain requirements. And with a push of a button, you basically get a quote and you can order the part. So it is getting really,
That's
easier.
amazing.
Yeah, it's really cool. So, I have this amazing vision of one day push button manufacturing in the same way that you can order from Amazon and just have something delivered to your door. You can have the same thing. You can have something made and you can have it fulfilled for you. You could become a manufacturer basically and just outsource your manufacturing. That's the future, but it's still early stages.
How do you find these people? How do you find the special ink and the platforms and these are amazing examples. Where do you find these people?
Oh, it's what I do. I just love to meet people. And I love, that's where I loved curating TEDx USC. It was really so much fun to discover that. I think that's kind of my superpower is to find undiscovered talent and ideas and help them make an impact and help them tell stories. And so that's why I'm doing what I'm doing with Make It in LA, because it's just this is not the nonprofit, because it's another way for me to be able to help entrepreneurs and designers who have these crazy dreams turn those passions into products.
That's a fantastic superpower. I do say so myself. I'm just sitting here thinking about the CNC machine. I'm a bit of a fan of wood, and I'm forever asking for things to be created out of wood. So if I had my own CNC machine, I would just be in heaven. I can't draw. I'm not an engineer, but I just think my whole house would be made out of ply. If I had a choice.
That's pretty funny. It's funny though. I'm the opposite in some ways because, even though I'm originally an engineer, and I, you'd think that all these new tools would be really, really great. At the same time, I miss the days of just working with your hands and thinking with your hands. So when I was in engineering school and we designed new products and new ideas, we would take these huge hunks of blue foam and a hot wire, and we would use the hot wire to cut these pieces of foam into different shapes, and you could just play around with it. So there's something very primal about the physical interface, and maybe I'm just old fashioned, but I still love to hold a book. I still love to play with clay or to make design in physical. And I think that that's not going away. I think that now we've had these CAM tools. I think that we're going to start seeing some more tools in the future that integrate that physical touch. I've seen some. I can't remember off the top of my head the names, but that's going to be a really exciting, I think, direction in the future.
I think you're right. Remember, adult coloring books came back. I think those other platforms are people like me for instant gratification.
Yeah.
I'm not about the process. Just give me the final product.
Well, I think that each person, we don't want everyone to be a designer, right? I think that that's
No,
but I do think,
trust me, you do not want me to be a designer.
well, one thing I worry about, and this is more of like a philosophical thought, but I'm very excited about this new progression of manufacturing. So you think about, everyone's talking about Industry 4.0, and well, at least the people who are in manufacturing are geeking out about something called Industry 4.0. Most people haven't heard of this, but it's the next progression from, Industry 1.0 was when you had, you had the steam engine and it kind of took away the physical toil away from manufacturing. And then Industry 2.0 was electricity and the assembly line, and that enabled us to create more mass production. And then Industry 3.0 was more of like the IT revolution. There's more robotics, and a lot of the innovations during that time have been much more, computer programming and that side of things. But I think that we're going into this new realm of Industry 4.0 where things are much more nimble. You have smarter robots, collaborative robots, Internet of Things, new materials, 3D printing, et cetera, and they're all connected, and it makes it easier for manufacturing to be much more nimble, which allows more and more people to be designers and to create their products like we're talking about. Now, on the flip side, you think back, when was the last time that happened? Well, think about the printing press, mass consumption, the internet, mass production. Everyone now is a journalist, right? And that's not always a good thing. So I think that that's one thing that we need to be careful of is I think that designers need to reassert themselves now more than ever to say that there's a real value in knowing how to understand trends, drive trends, understand customer needs, and respond to them, as opposed to just allowing, anyone can design anything, right? But I think that as designers really need to, more than ever, to kind of show their value, because I think that is going to be where that's going to be the job of the future, is the designer. To be able to do that is going to be a superpower.
Speaking of value, I would love to know your thoughts on manufacturing offshore versus onshore.
It really depends. Of course, I'm a huge fan of local manufacturing, but I'm also very pragmatic. And I think it's really important that every company makes the decision for themselves. I do think that there's a bit of a assumption that going overseas is the right thing to do without really having all the information. So there's a lot of reasons why local manufacturing is much better. First of all, you have the quality control. You can see the product on the line. And in fact, if you're not a really experienced entrepreneur when it comes to manufacturing, then you really don't want to have to be communicating overseas. And with more complex products like hardware products, you need to be there for like 4 months as you're setting up the production. And so and there's cultural differences. I know I have a colleague who had ordered a particular part with an LED light that was supposed to be low profile. Someone ordered the wrong ones and sent them to the manufacturer. Well, the manufacturer in China and in Asia in general, I think they tend to be a little bit more deferential and don't question. And so they're like, oh, well, they must have meant that. And so then they ended up cutting a sunroof in the product to allow the light to show, thinking that instead of asking, wait a minute, is this the right product or right component? So, that would have never happened had it been local. And so there's that. There's also, sustainability and ethical reasons. It's a lot easier to make sure that, you have your finger on that if that's something that's important to you. And then there's also this assumption that manufacturing locally is more expensive. And that can sometimes be the case, but a lot of times is not. And as time goes on, Chinese labor is going up. The shipping costs add a lot of duties and taxes and all this. So in the end, there's something called like the total cost of ownership. And if you're in the United States, there's an organization called, I think it's reshorenow.org. And there's a TCO estimator on there. And so you can put in all the information and figure out even just from a pure cost perspective, which is going to cost more. So you factor that in. But I think it's really important to not forget all those extra costs. That's not to mention all the risks involved in intellectual property theft, of not getting what you want. And also, probably I think the most exciting thing is the innovation potential. So innovation tends to happen near where the manufacturing is happening. And that's just a sort of general thing. And as an entrepreneur, if you're trying to iterate on an idea, you're not going to iterate as fast if you're doing it remotely and if you're waiting for a shipping container for 6 weeks to show up. Of course you can send it by air freight, but if you're really going to be talking about volumes, it takes a long time. So there's a lot of reasons why local can be much more compelling beyond just the branding element of the fact that it's locally made.
Yeah, you were saying that, and I was just thinking of one of my clients who manufactures small runs of her product at the moment. And now she's going to contract manufacturers because she's gotten so large. And it's been a bit of a nightmare for her because she has quite stringent standards that she needs to meet to maintain the credentials that she has. But what she has discovered is when she's out there meeting with the contract manufacturers, that they're giving her ideas on how they could actually improve her already pretty good formula. And so, like you were saying, the innovation is there from someone who's doing this day in, day out, and who isn't involved with your particular product. They might be able to suggest something that can radically change the effectiveness of whatever, or even the profitability of the thing that you're manufacturing.
Definitely. And I think that there's a huge value in having that face-to-face relationship and see how it's made too. A lot of times you have insights when you see it being made. You're like, oh, I can make it a lot cheaper. If I did it a different way. And sometimes I had one of the guests on my podcast had a long history of apparel manufacturing, and was explaining how a lot of the students that are coming out of fashion school these days, they don't understand the manufacturing. So they will spec a certain type of a hem or a sleeve or whatever, and say, okay, go do it. And they send it off to a really low cost place like Vietnam. And then they get it. And it turns out that they could get it way cheaper if they were just working with the manufacturer, who would say, you know what, you could save a lot of money if you did it this other way.
Okay, let me just tell you a quick story about that.
Yeah.
Because that one hits a little bit close to home. So we used to manufacture these really simple sort of pinafore style dresses in our shop. And I used to have a local seamstress who made them, and we used to cut them in the store. And then they got too popular. So we went out to a contract manufacturer who said, and we still continued to cut them in store because I was a little bit fussy about the way that they were cut. And nobody mentioned to me, even though we did have a manufacturer, nobody mentioned to me that the cutting was actually the most expensive part of the process and most time-consuming part of the process. Sorry, the most time-consuming, not the most expensive. It was most expensive for us because I was paying someone $25 an hour to do the cutting. And then one of my staff who had worked in the fashion industry had said to me, why doesn't the manufacturer cut these? Like, this seems really odd that we're here cutting them in the back storeroom. And I was like, I think that's probably going to be the really expensive part. She said, why don't you just get a quote? And so not only did we get a quote at 30 cents,
Wow.
we'd make a total of 30 cents to each garment. But they actually said, oh, well, if you want us to cut them, we can lay them out in a certain way. Like, you tell us the ratio you want in sizes, and we'll put the fabric out and we'll maximize the amount of clothes that you can get. So we ended up getting something like an extra 20% of garments out of the fabric because they knew how to position everything to get the best run out of it.
Yes.
So the 30 cents became nothing in the end because we ended up with, dozens of more product.
Well, and it is funny too, because depending on where you're getting it manufactured, the labor and the materials play a different role in the price. So if you're in Asia, the labor is nothing, but the materials may be a bigger issue. But then if you're in the US and the labor is really high, so it's different. So you just have to, it depends on where you're doing it.
And it also just means you have to go out there and talk to people, because you may be pleasantly surprised, like I was,
Mm-hmm.
at how much easier and quicker, because these people are specialized at what they do. They have the products, they have the experience, they have the machinery to be able to give you the best product. And sometimes, I think sometimes for product creators, it can be hard to let go of that handmade philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think? Do you find that?
I don't know. I mean, LA is a different place than a lot of other cities that are kind of having a resurgence of interest in local manufacturing. A good example is we have friends up in San Francisco, SF Made, and they're an amazing organization that have been around for a while. That basically all of the manufacturers in the city of San Francisco are members, and that's 600 manufacturers. And then in LA, we have something like, depending on how you count, 12,000 to 30,000 manufacturers in LA County. I mean, it's just huge. And they're doing everything from bolts to entire, transportation systems like Hyperloop or SpaceX. So there's just such a and they're not, a lot of them are not contract manufacturers. And so I think that the manufacturers in LA are less focused on the brand aspect of being from LA. That said, I think that there is an advantage when it comes to very consumer facing things like fashion and food, especially food, because we're kind of like the bread basket. California's like the bread basket of the country. And so I think it depends. I think it really depends. Yeah.
Do you see people run into problems with things like intellectual property? I know we just briefly touched on, if you go offshore, sometimes your intellectual property itself is at risk. But in terms of, say you are manufacturing something that's not clothing, because that's usually the first thing that comes to people's mind. But say you're manufacturing a tech product, and the product that you need, maybe a gadget or a widget or a piece of technology already exists. How can you not have to reinvent the wheel? Is it possible, or do you have to go and create it yourself?
Oh gosh, the multi-layered. So yeah, I mean, fashion, there is no IP protection, and so your whole business model needs to be constantly innovating, constantly creating, and that's pretty cool. That's its own kind of beast. And then on the hardware side, I think that one of my interviewees was from Local Roots. They're a vertical farming company. They decided to take a lot of their LED development and some of their manufacturing in-house, because to them the lighting was their sort of core competency, their secret sauce. And so they felt like it was really important to develop their own rather than depend on other suppliers and have something special. So I think that was one of the things, that is one of the things that you need to think about is, how much is that development your secret sauce, in which case you may want to keep that in-house. Another consideration when you're looking for contract manufacturers is that so a lot of times you do have to work with a contract manufacturer. You may not have the expertise in some of the technology. I mean, it may not be, you're just rearranging the technology in a new way, so that there's not a lot of IP there, except for, you can protect it with a patent if you have a certain concept, but it's not really that hard. But you want to, when you're looking at the CMs, the contract manufacturers, you do a tour, there's like a whole process where you want to make sure that you can trust them. And I always find it a really good sign when you go in and you say, oh, can I take a picture of that? And if they say, oh no, you have to, or they're very particular about what you take pictures of. If they say, no, that's a client's work, then that's a good sign, because that means that they're taking the client's work seriously, the IP seriously. So I think, a lot of it's based on trust.
What is the one thing, what was the one thing that you see happening over and over again, where if somebody is going to get their product manufactured, this is the one thing that they should do first, because you see time and time again, if someone doesn't do it, that the whole process just ends up going pear-shaped.
Make sure that you have a business model that works. I think that a lot of folks, they have a fanciful idea, but they don't know that anyone would actually buy the product. And I do think that prototypes are a great way to test that out. So yeah, I mean, just make sure that your customer, you have a custom, you have a product. Let me start over. You have to make sure that you have a product market fit. And I think that there is a tendency for designers or engineers or whoever to say, okay, I'm going to make this perfect, and then I'm going to go into mass production. There's two things wrong with that. First of all, it's never going to be perfect, and that means that you've waited too long to release it. And then second of all, of course, you're investing a lot of money into it when you don't even know, right? So the iteration process is really important.
That's why places like Kickstarter exist.
That's true, yeah. And I think that a lot of companies have gotten into trouble on Kickstarter. So that's a whole other conversation. But there have been a lot of hardware products that don't...
In terms of testing the market?
Well, I think that testing the market, Kickstarter is good for that because it helps validate some interest, right? But I think that a lot of times folks that put ideas on Kickstarter, they don't realize how much it's really going to cost to take something to market, what the bill of materials or BOM is going to cost, understanding that you don't just basically charge BOM, a little bit over the BOM when you sell it. I mean, I think that a lot of folks get into trouble, and timelines. So I think that the best, in that particular case, the best solution is to talk with an engineer, even, if you have to pay for it. And there are services out there. There's like Dragon Certified is one. There's others that will take a look and will give you kind of like a sense of, okay, your bill of materials makes sense, your timeline makes sense, what you're asking. And the Kickstarter themselves will help you with that. They have a new program that they're doing that will work with creators. And we also, Make It in LA, is doing that locally as well. So companies that are interested in manufacturing locally, we have a program called our Catalyst program that we're just launching for creators that are interested in doing that. And then we will give hands-on help to the companies to figure out, how do you pick the partner? Are you ready to go into manufacturing yet? Providing exclusive tours and workshops and access to different services like legal Zooms, business legal packages, so stuff like that, and building a community of like-minded entrepreneurs that want to make in LA.
That sounds like a fabulous program for anybody who wants to get their product into manufacturing and get it out into the world.
Yeah, I mean, depending on when this airs, our deadline is in early April, so we hope that people will apply for the program if they're close enough to LA where it makes sense.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of these tips. I think a lot of the tips that you've shared in terms of going out to even think about manufacturing, you've given people a few things to be really wary of and also to be optimistic about. Plus, your program sounds like a fantastic opportunity for those that are local to LA. And I know that there are quite a few listening who are in that region. So if they're interested in talking to you about the program or even to listen to the podcast, where can they find you?
Yeah, so learn about the program at makeitinla.org. And you can sign up for a newsletter as well to get notifications of events, things like that. And then for the podcast, you can go to artofmfg.com or just search for The Art of Manufacturing on your podcast player.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was a lot of fun.
I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Bringing Business to Retail podcast. You can find all of the show notes over at selinaknight.com. If you found something that you heard today particularly useful, I'd love it if you could leave me a review on iTunes or Stitcher. And of course, feel free to share this episode with someone that you think could benefit by listening to it. Want more retail biz strategies? You can watch the Bringing Business to Retail TV show, where each week I'll answer a question or provide you with a simple, actionable retail biz strategy that you can implement in your business right away. If you have a question or a guest, I'd love to hear from you. Drop my team an email at podcast@selinaknight.com, and I'll see you on the next episode. Have a great week.